If you haven't already, be sure to watch my video on the worst moves of the offseason, as that video will rile you up as I address where your team went wrong, and this video will calm you down if your team redeems themselves in any way. Also, this is not in order of best moves to least best. It's in order of average annual value of the contracts of the players. So, with that said, we're going to start off with DK Metcalf, the Steelers making a great move. Just kidding. That was actually a bad move for them and a very good move for the Seahawks. The Seahawks get a second rounder, which is number 52 overall, and they swap 6 and 7 round picks with the Steelers, so they move back a little bit in the chiefly insignificant rounds of the draft. So, the reason this is a great move for Seattle is it's fair pick value, and by that I mean Metcalf is a very high end wide receiver too, but a second rounder, you can definitely get a replacement for that, and you can get them on a rookie deal. More importantly, with the contract situation, though, is that they avoid overpaying DK like the Steelers did. Pittsburgh gave him a 4-year, $33 million per year extension, which is the 12th most in average annual value for a wide receiver. He is 38th in yards per route run this past year for wide receivers, with a better quarterback than he was going to have in Seattle with Darnold, more than likely. Darnold's best year is Geno's average in the past 3 years. And in Pittsburgh, they don't really have a starting quarterback currently. So he could definitely fall off from where he was, and he was overpaid relative to where he was. Anyways, the next move is another move that's going to be controversial because fans like to see big names acquired, logically, and they don't really care, though, to focus on what was given up for said player. So that's kind of where fans can go wrong. And with Laramie Tunsil, the Texans actually won the trade because it's a really weird transaction in pick value where they get a third and a seventh this year, number 75 and number 243, but they exchange a fourth, number 128. So they really only move up and kind of get a pick with that seventh rounder. That's, probably nothing. But again, you'd rather have a pick than not. So in addition to that, though, they get a second and a fourth next year. What I like about this is Washington will likely regress, and I think they're going to regress pretty heavily because with their roster talent, they overachieved tremendously this year. They probably don't have a playoff caliber team for this past season. Jaden Daniels has the best rookie year of all time, so that definitely uplifts them. But their team is genuinely pretty bad. So they're going to be worse next year and have better picks next year, which, yes, you tend to devalue picks in the future because we live in a world, especially in the NFL, where jobs are erased very quickly. So you want to win as soon as possible, but I'd rather have a better pick in the future than a worse pick right now. I guarantee you the Commanders don't make it back to the NFC Championship game this upcoming season. They didn't upgrade their team. They were kind of lucky to get there in the first place. So I like this for the Texans a lot, especially too. Laramie Tunsil, very solid player, very good, not elite. He is on a 2-year, 25 million a year contract, which is the fifth most average annual value for a tackle. In 8 years, pretty sizable sample size, his best PFF tackle rank is 11th. That alone makes this contract kind of a dud, but also that was 2 years ago, so it's not even, the most recent sample we have of him. He's not old, but he is in the back end of his prime. So to get off of him being overpaid, get some real assets, I think this is a really, really good move for the Texans. And yes, it's a bit wonky because they have a team that's ready to win right now. So it's a bit odd to focus on acquiring draft picks, especially, not even this year in the draft. But you can't turn down a deal like this. The money, the draft picks, just exquisite value for the Texans. And they just then need to fill out the offensive line with competent starters, and they'll be better set than they were because the offensive line is a weak link position. So you're as good as your weakest player is. If you have 5 solid offensive linemen, you're better off than having, a superstar. Well, Tunsil's not a superstar, but a star level tackle, and then some scrubs around him. So this is modernizing the Texans. It's giving them fuel to extend their championship window. This is a great move. The next move I really like is with Detroit getting DJ Reed as a free agent, the first free agent move. Reed signs a 3-year, $16 million per year contract. That is certainly fair money. He, for what it's worth, was projected per PFF. All the projections are from PFF. He was projected, I believe, 14 million a year. It was very close to 14 if it wasn't. So it's, 2 million per year over what he was expected, but that's totally fine on a contract like this. He is the best free agent man coverage cornerback for sure. Arguably just the best cornerback in free agency, full stop. And defensive coordinator, Kelvin Shepard. We don't know exactly what scheme he's going to run, but we do know that he coached with Aaron Glenn since 2021. So he'll likely be running a lot of man coverage. Aaron Glenn just loves running his man coverage. So you figure Shepard, who was underneath him, picked up some things along the way. And also just for cohesion's sake, I think the Lions are, predisposed to running a pretty similar scheme because they've constructed their roster in a way that's conducive to man coverage success. They have corners such as Terrion Arnold, who, you don't necessarily want to bank on. He had a really rough rookie year, but he projects to be a good man coverage corner. And Reed, again, has also excelled in that area, so you tend to think you're going to use him in his best area. The next signing is another defensive back signing with the New York Giants, of all teams, with Javon Holland. He signed a 3-year, $15 million per year contract, which is $6 million per year less than projected. I do kind of question that projection in the first place. $21 million per year for a safety sounds a bit rich for me, especially he's a very good safety, but not like definitively the number one guy, which I think if you're getting that much money, you should be. But that's not to sully the move because Holland has excelled in heavy man coverage schemes where, as a safety, he was manning up about 40% of the time. which is extremely high. The average is somewhere in the 20s, like 25% or so. He's also been very good in deep zone coverages and also in the box. So I think he's kind of a scheme proof player, which is honestly tremendously rare. There are not many players in the entire league like that, especially at defensive back. So that's great all around. And another reason this is just a really good look for the Giants is he signed for $2 million a year less than the older and worse Trayvon Moehrig. So they really got a good deal in like every way you could imagine. The next move I like is finally getting off the defensive back wagon is Minnesota signing Javon Hargrave, back-to-back Javons, 2 years, $15 million per year. He is getting the 22nd most average annual value for a defensive interior. Since leaving the Steelers, he's been bad to egregiously bad in run defense. Very odd considering he was actually pretty stout against the run for the Steelers. But I do bring that up because maybe he does have potential to return to being an every down player if the team ask him to, pay attention to the run as well, not just be a pass rushing specialist. Maybe Philly and the 49ers were just saying, hey, all we want is for you to get after the quarterback. Either way, getting after the quarterback is something he certainly does at a high level, a very high level. Aside for this year where he was injured, his lowest pressure numbers in the past 4 years had him ranked as defensive tackle number 6. I think this is a tremendous signing for the Vikings. I am a Hargrave guy. I've liked him since his days in Pittsburgh, so I'm a little bit biased, but the numbers back this as well. This is not just an opinionated, thing. So Hargrave is somebody that can be one of the absolute best pass rushers from the inside and possibly offer every down support as well. The next move is with the Denver Broncos, signing Evan Ingram to a 2-year, $12 million per year contract, another 2-year deal. He gets the 10th most average annual value for a tight end. So the money's, I think, pretty appropriate. Last year, which was his last full year, he was 9th in yards per route run for a tight end, so that affirms the, contract. And he, most importantly for me, plugs the only big hole on offense for Denver, which ensures that they can go best player available in the draft throughout the entire draft. Maybe you want to slightly lean towards drafting a player that, could be a starting corner, say, where they do need a little bit of help. But they did have a rather glaring need at tight end, which is actually kind of a big deal because Sean Payton is, I would say, overall a very versatile coach, but is a coach that does value the tight end position throughout the years, and he can scheme up the tight end in a variety of ways, which Evan Ingram is one of, if not the best athletes at the tight end position still, even though he's getting up there in age. He ran the 40 in, I believe, 4.43 seconds, which is just ridiculous for his size. That's a great wide receiver 40. So, a tight end, even more so. Ingram is such a good addition. He fits what they need. He fits, a hole in the roster. And with the rookie contract situation, you want to capitalize on the window you get where you're, cheaper than you should be with the player getting at the quarterback position. So filling out the roster, you can overpay some players. Ingram is not an overpay, I don't believe. but you even could just because you have more money to work with than you probably should. So why not capitalize on, having a good young quarterback and also having a team to support him as well? I think this is just good all around. Another move in the AFC West that I like is with the Raiders signing or re-signing Malcolm Kuntz to a 1-year, $12 million contract. This is a deal that is reminiscent to Josh Uche re-signing with the Patriots. Hopefully, it goes better for all parties than it did with Uche and the Patriots, because Uche was tremendous in upside after a great year, signs a just super underpaid contract, doesn't really pan out. Kuntz has a ton of potential as well, and is coming off a great year in 2023, was playing very insignificant amount of time this year due to injury. So he signs a deal that is $7 million less than he was projected to get, which honestly might have been cheap to begin with. That $19 million is, not too high end of money for an edge rusher these days. And Kuntz showed tremendous upside as a pass rusher, which is obviously the more important side of the game for an edge rusher. So he gets 27th in average annual value for an edge. In his last full year, he was 31st in edge pressures, which, that's a good deal right there. But what makes it a great deal is he was playing 150 or more less pressure snaps than the number one edge rusher in pressures was. So he could have been way higher in pressure ranks if he played more. So he has a lot of potential. He is a good athlete. So he has basically everything you want in an edge rusher. He's been productive. He's a good athlete. I like this move a ton for the Raiders. Another move that I really like is the Dolphins signing James Daniels to a 3-year, $8 million per year contract. The money is perfectly fine. He was projected to get a 1-year, $6 million contract, but I like the 3-year variant because I think you can lock him in to a deal. I don't like this for him or his agent, but for the team, you can lock him into a deal that is lesser in value than what he's actually worth. He's getting the 24th average annual value for a guard, and this past season, he flashed a ton in small snaps. With an offensive line in Pittsburgh that's not very good, he was far and away their best lineman. And I guess Frazier was also pretty good, but Daniels at the time was easily their best lineman, no questions asked. I don't have these stats to back it because it was such a small sample size. It was like, I think, 140 snaps, which is just very insignificant. That's a couple games. So he has tremendous upside, but he also has a great career baseline. He's been in the league for several years. He's kind of the ideal free agent in the sense that he has a great sort of resume, but he's also not old. He entered the league at a young age. I believe he was 20, which is very young. Usually the youngest in the draft is 21. So Daniels has been in the league a very long time. He's been very solid for a very long time. And this past year, he was amazing. So I love this for the Dolphins. I think the money is going to look like a total bargain deal if he just can return to his baseline form. And if he actually is the player we saw for the brief moment last year, this is going to look like just a total steal for the Dolphins. A move that isn't quite to that level, but I still like quite a bit, is with the Panthers, who have done a lot of wrong this year in the offseason. But a move that was good for them was Bobby Brown, the defensive tackle. 3 years, $7 million a year. I again like the 3 year aspect of this because if you just get his average level of pay or play, the pay is going to be perfectly fine. He has the average annual value at this moment of the 44th defensive interior. His PFF ranks in 2 years of enough snaps to get a rank equal 47th and 27th. So, you know, theoretically, him at the lower end of his play as a full-time starter is going to be, perfectly fine for this contract with rookies not making the money they should. That, makes the 44th kind of actually a bargain for a player that's 47th, if that makes sense. So he is going to be worth that, I think, kind of no matter what. But his upside, which might not have even been shown to this point, but if he just returns to, the upper level of what he's shown as a starter already, he's going to way surpass the value they gave him. He's only 25, so he can develop further. That's why I said he may not have even shown his best version of himself yet. And also, he's going to be playing alongside Derek Brown. The Rams had a good rotation at defensive tackle, I'll admit. So it's not like it's, a totally new concept for Brown to be playing alongside another good defensive tackle. But Derek Brown, if he returns to form, is one of the 3 to 5, I'd probably say 3, actually, best defensive tackles in the league. So Brown is going to benefit from that as well. So that, in addition, there's just so much I like about this deal. It's a small deal, but I think it's a great deal. But in addition to the fact that they have to pay a scrub tax, where the Panthers, being a very bad team at the moment, they have to overpay free agents to come their way, because why do you want to go to a bad team when you can go to a good team if the money is similar? So they have to overpay. They did not overpay Bobby Brown. They underpaid him pretty substantially, I would say. So the next move I like is with the Rams, with Coleman Shelton signing a 2-year, $6 million per year contract. The money, it's fine. It's about what he was projected to get. But what makes this work so well for me is Bo Limmer, their center that was going to start before this signing, was just tragically bad. He was 39 out of 39, so dead last in PFF center pass blocking. So dude sucks. And Shelton is at a minimum an average starter. He can be above average as well. He's shown that for a full season. He's experienced with the Rams. He was with them before. He's a big upgrade for little money. And with Stafford slowing down, you want to, take the ball out of his hands a bit more, make sure he's not getting pressured as much, especially. Shelton will help with the run game. He'll help make sure that, Limmer was going to allow pressure on every other snap, pretty much. So Shelton helps in a lot of ways. The Rams are ready to win now. Shelton helps ensure that for very little money. One of my absolute favorite moves of this offseason is the Vikings signing Isaiah Rodgers to a 1-year, $6 million contract. Rodgers is probably most known for being suspended a full year for betting on NFL games, which thereby gave him 2 times the penalty, actually over 2 times the penalty, of every 742 domestic violence perpetrators and sexual assaulters the NFL has seen put together. Rodgers is a great cornerback. He should not be known for that incident. He is great in both man and zone coverage. He is another scheme-proof player. And even the best cornerbacks can change a lot year to year, but his worst PFF rank in 3 years of being ranked is 25 out of 116. So cornerback 1 level of play. His average annual value is cornerback 36. I think this is such great value. Again, it's not doing him as much justice as it should because there are rookies that are getting paid way less than they should, so that changes the dynamics of his contract value. But just take it at face value. He's getting underpaid. And he's entering another great situation. Brian Flores tends to get the most out of his players. The Vikings, they needed cornerback. This is just great all around. We get to the wacky part of this video where the Browns are making logical, good moves. Cornelius Lucas, the offensive tackle, signed to a 2-year, $5 million per year contract. Dude's about 97 years old, so that's a little bit worrying, but he's 28th in left tackle average annual value, and he's 28th as well in PFF rank for all offensive tackles. So he's definitely worth this contract. Also, he was Washington's best graded offensive lineman by 6 PFF points as well, which is massive. That's the difference between being a good player and being all right. He was, one of the lone bright spots for that offensive line. And, now he joins a line with the Browns where at a minimum, he's going to be probably the best or among, at the very, very minimum, best swing tackles, but he definitely can be a starter as well. The reason this is the wacky part of the video is we have back-to-back insane moves from bad teams, with the Titans again in this video striking with Xavier Woods. 2 years, $5 million a year. Per PFF, he's been above average 5 of 8 years, so more than half of his career, if you couldn't do the math, at a position that's very, very hard to be consistent at. He's 32nd in safety average annual value. Again, he's somebody that projects to be at a minimum average, so this is a good value. He could also be above average, which would make this great value. I think this is a really smart signing by the Titans. They need a considerable amount of work, so they can't, afford to sign huge names all over the place. But Woods, he projects to be a starter and projects to be a really good value as well. We temporarily return to normalcy with a good team making a good move in the Ravens. They have not been active at all this offseason, which sometimes is the best move. It's better to not be active than to overpay players. DeAndre Hopkins is a good budget signing. 1 year, $5 million. He was projected to make twice this amount. I will admit he's a bit washed, but he was 54th in yards per out run for a team with no receiving talent. And Deebo Samuel was 68th in yards per out run. He cost a 5th round pick as well and was making $13 million more than Hopkins is going to make. That just shows, one, how ridiculous of an overpay all around the Commanders made for Samuel, but it also shows, man, these Ravens got a steal. So we kind of reach a baseline level of insane for this next move because the Chargers are not as poorly ran as the Browns and Titans, but they're way, way worse than the Ravens. Chargers kind of probably more than likely made a bad move signing Jim Harbaugh to be their coach. He's not a modern thinker by any stretch. He is somebody that requires great coordinators because he doesn't do any of the coaching himself. And, he's kind of failed miserably in getting coordinators. Jesse Minter, one of the great defensive minds of the game currently. So that's a good signing. But then Greg Roman, Harbaugh must think there's only like 3 offensive coordinators in the world because he just keeps rehiring Greg Roman. And Roman just is not a good offensive coordinator. Definitely one of the worst in the league. So the Chargers, they've made some really bad moves that have set the team back. But a good move is them signing Najee Harris. 1 year, $5 million. I don't like giving free agent running backs or just running backs in general contracts basically ever, but I actually like this a fair amount. The thing with Harris is, speaking of poorly ran old teams, we have the Steelers, who wanted Najee to suffer. I don't know why this is, but they wanted him to suffer. So they inexplicably drafted him number 24 overall, a position that is the least valuable full-time position in the NFL, and they needed a ton of other positions. To hurt him more, they did the no pass challenge for 4 years, and to compound that, they ran vanilla run concepts as well to ensure that defenses could further key in on Najee. Through this fascinating approach, Harris had the 5th most missed tackles forced this year, which is gasp. This is insane. One of the craziest stats around, genuinely. That's more than Saquon Barkley had. And you might be thinking, well, Najee just had a lot more touches, right? Wrong. The opposite. Barkley had 120 more snaps than Harris had. So Harris had more missed tackles forced than Barkley did and way less snaps. That's not to say that Najee is better than Barkley, but, in an aspect, he's way better than him. So, the Chargers, again, they're archaic like the Steelers are. So that's going to be something that makes for a challenge for Najee more than, other players. But the Chargers have a better offensive line, have a much, much better quarterback, just a general better surrounding cast. So Najee could be a player that is on the rise, and he's already shown to be solid. So I like this a lot, and again, I do not like signing running backs. The next move I like is for a really good team in Detroit, Levi Unzarike, great name. 1 year, $4 million. That is $6 million less than he was projected to get. His career is a fantastic observation. He sucked as a rookie. He didn't play years 2 and 3, and he was a defensive tackle 1 this year. I love gambling on him. He is 63rd in average annual value for a defensive tackle. That is basically the lowest end defensive tackle 2 money. And again, he showed himself to be capable of being your number 1 defensive tackle this year. What's additionally impressive about that is there was basically nothing going right for the Lions on defense this past year. They had like 18 or something guys on the injured reserve at one point. That may sound like an exaggeration. It might be a little bit, but it wasn't much of one. They had genuinely just so much of their team hurt. So Levi showed a ton of promise with, defense or offenses being able to key in on him, and you sign him to just an absolute bare minimum level contract. Another defensive lineman that is on a bare minimum type of contract is Derek Barnett on another 1 year, $4 million contract. I absolutely love the money. Barnett's worst PFF edge rank in the past 2 years is 25 out of 119. So with the rank, he is playing enough snaps rather, to really, solidify himself as a contributor. It's not like he played, you know, 10 snaps and was great for two of them. That looks really nice. No, he's playing a substantial amount. So he's a really good rotational guy. I genuinely think, value wise, all 32 teams, every last one of them, I don't care if you're a good edge rusher already or not, they all should have been in on him. He has the average annual value for an edge rusher as number 62 in the league. Once again, the very lowest of low end for a player at his position. And for a starter, that is. And Barnett has shown himself to be a legit starting caliber player. He's another guy that's pretty scheme proof. He's not the most athletic, he never has been, but he's very technically sound. He's strong. He's pretty well built. He can be a player that defends the run at a high level on early downs. He can be a guy that gets after the passer on third down. I think he could move into the inside and be a rush defensive tackle on, third and long passing situations. I think he is just such a good bargain. And another player, back to Detroit, that I think is a good bargain, another defensive tackle, in fact, is Roy Lopez. Definitely not a household name. Reasonably so. I'm not judging you for that. He is a, rotational pass rushing defensive tackle, signed for 1 year, $4 million. He is 72nd in average annual value for defensive tackle, so third defensive tackle money, and he was 34th, so super high end defensive tackle 2 money player rather, in PFF defensive interior pass rush grade. I will admit he absolutely sucks versus the run, but he's only going to be playing passing downs. So, you play him to his skill set and you get a very good player for no money. Another situation sort of similar to that, another 1 year, $4 million contract, is Marcus Epps. In 4 years, with at least a quarter of the snaps played, he has 2 very good years, 1 solid year, and 1 year as a low end starter. He's great as a run defender. I think he's a great gamble as well. Again, the Patriots have a need basically over the entire roster, and Kyle Duggar might not be good anymore. He's been so up and down throughout his career, shown a ton of promise, but has also sucked at times. So Epps, he could be the starting safety over Duggar if Duggar doesn't pan out. Epps could also be, the sort of linebacker safety role as well that particularly comes in on passing situations if you want to like convert to a dime. So Epps, I think, is a very smart signing by New England. With the Raiders now, we have a Landon Roberts, 1 year, $3 million. They swapped Roberts playing for a Landon Roberts. They always have to have one linebacker, Roberts. They saved $8 million in the process. Roberts is 2 years older, but is basically just a much better Robert Spillane. They play the exact same way. Roberts in back-to-back years has been great. So I like this move quite a bit for the Raiders. Next, we have Cleveland again with another small signing that is pretty solid with Devin Bush. 1 year, $3 million. I hate Cleveland. They have a sexual predator at quarterback. Everybody just turns a blind eye to that. So I want nothing but their failure, and particularly Watson's. But I'm happy for Devin Bush. In his first 5 years, one of which was with Brian Flores, who is just one of the absolute best defensive minds in the game. He was the linebackers coach for the Steelers when Bush was there. And Bush still peaked as PFF's number 35 linebacker. This year, he was number 8. He's 50th in linebacker average annual value. So that is just a steal. It's a very real chance he doesn't return to form because he has basically no baseline of play. But I'm willing to take a swing on him. He could very easily be a starting caliber linebacker for the Browns. They do have 2 very good linebackers in Jordan Hicks and Rusu Kormoa. So that's going to be difficult for Bush, but Bush is a really good thumping linebacker that has all the athletic abilities in the world that could make him a coverage linebacker as well. But at a minimum, you project him to be a guy that gets in the rare instances where you have 3 linebackers on the field, or if Jeremiah or Musu Kormoa or Jordan Hicks need a break, you get Bush in there. So I like Bush a ton. I love seeing players that struggle out of the gates figure it out. And, that might just be Bush moving forward. Philly, you had to figure they would be here. They are one of the best ran teams in the league, if not the best. And they make a very good small signing with Josh Uche. 1 year, $2 million. I mentioned Uche before. He had that great year in New England, probably like 3 years ago now. And, he's been pretty rough since then. But this is like a legitimate minimum contract he signed. He got less than half of what he was projected for. He was projected to get $5 million. He was an awesome pass rusher in 2022. He had back-to-back bad years. He is certainly worth the risk, in my opinion, as he's getting edge rusher 3 money, which is, kind of right. He is a 3rd edge rusher, maybe a 4th, whatever. The Eagles are hard to evaluate because they're so stacked. But that's 87th in average annual value for an edge that has just super great upside. It's a bit redundant in the sense that with Hunt and with Nolan Smith is a great run defender, so he's a little bit different, but he's also a speedy edge. And then Bryce Huff, you have a bunch of smaller, speedy edge rushers. So Uche doesn't provide a new element, but he does provide a very valuable element, possibly, in being a great pass rusher. And the Eagles, they rotate their defensive line seemingly every other play, always having fresh players out there. So, even though he's not different from what they have, I love this signing. The upside for him is potentially the biggest in outplaying the value he's getting because if you get a real third down savant out of a $2 million contract, that's just insane. So the Eagles, they have a great coaching staff. They can, you know, potentially mold him to be what they want. I think this is just a great low risk, high reward move. Finally, the last move of this video is with Minnesota with Tavier Thomas signing another 1 year, $2 million contract. In the past 4 years, he has 3 great years in a row, then 45 snaps this year. I don't know if it was a case of him being ineffective, hurt, or just not being as good as the starter over him. But either way, 3 great years in a row, in the past 4 years, and signing basically a minimum contract. Sign me up. I just love taking a chance on him. He could outperform the money drastically like Uche could. He's a much, different situation. Thomas is a seasoned vet. Uche is still on the younger side. So it's not, apples to apples, but yeah, the value I think is a similar situation. Thomas could be a very good contributor. So signing him for basically the minimum, I think is just great process. Those are my thoughts on the best moves of the offseason so far. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. Also, be sure to like and subscribe for more football content.